Good evening, everybody. I'm David Asman, sitting in for Lou Dobbs. Lou remains in self-quarantine. He's in good health, and he's going to be joining us later in this program. We are also awaiting a briefing from the White House Coronavirus Task Force. We will be taking that live as it starts. President Trump today instilling hope for the American economy. The president saying that America is a nation that wasn't built for a shutdown.
Our country is not supposed to be, it's not built to shut down. Our people are full of vim and vigor and energy. They don't want to be locked into a house or an apartment or some space. It's not for our country. We're not built that way. And I said, I don't want the cure to be worse than the problem itself, the problem being obviously the problem. And, you can destroy a country this way by closing it down, where it literally goes from being the most prosperous. I mean, we had the best economy in the history of our country 3 weeks ago. And then all of a sudden we're supposed to shut it down.
The president also saying that he hopes to have the nation back open for business within weeks.
The Senate and the House, we seem to be getting along as much as you can get along. We seem to be getting along now on a bill. I think that maybe had even less of an impact than the fact that we're opening up this incredible country, because we have to do that. I'd love to have it open by Easter. Okay, I would love to have it open by Easter. I will tell you that right now. I would love to have that. It's such an important day for other reasons, but I'll make it an important day for this too. I would love to have the country opened up and just raring to go by Easter.
That's April 12th.
April 12th, the president's hope for an American reopening by Easter, buoyed by his administration's efforts to find a deal with resistant Democrats who are holding up much-needed aid to the American people. The president's leadership restoring confidence in the American people, and the president's approval rating shows it. In the most recent Gallup poll, which was released today, the president has matched his all-time high approval rating, gaining 5 points in less than 10 days. Now, the optimism coming from the administration playing out on Wall Street today with a major market rally. The Dow finishing up more than 11%. This is 11% with its points in less than 10 days. This is the largest point gain in history, up more than 2,100 points. The Nasdaq gained 8%, up 557 points, which is an amazing record for that index. And the S&P up more than 10%, up 210 points. And breaking news tonight, White House Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx highlighting the increased testing for the virus in the United States. Birx saying that the U.S. has conducted more than 300,000 tests. President Trump hailing this achievement. Listen.
Remember, we've done more tests in 8 days than South Korea has done in 8 weeks. And our tests are better. They're highly sophisticated.
Joining me now is Kimberly Strassel, a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, author of the new book, Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. Kim, great to see you. More tests.
Hi, David.
Hi, more testing in 8 days than South Korea, which is supposedly the model, had in 8 weeks. Once again, our abilities have been vastly underrated by America's critics, internal and external.
Yeah, and I would make a point of saying that because the reason that we have that vast ramp up in tests is because of the very people that a lot of folks and Democrats in Washington are bashing on right now, which is our private sector. Originally the CDC tried to do this. Its first attempt at the testing got botched, and it was private actors who came riding to the rescue with these high-speed tests, which they managed to get out quickly. So American ingenuity, and when we put our minds to this stuff, it's amazing what we can accomplish.
But when people inside the Beltway put their minds to anything, it's amazing what they can screw up. And the most recent vision of this is what's happening with the so-called stimulus bill. AOC, of all people, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is calling it the crony capitalist slush fund. Now, it's bad enough as it was, but the way she wants to turn it into some kind of extraordinary Green New Deal, Bernie Sanders' dream, she's pushing Schumer to the left, partly because, as you've mentioned in an editorial today in the Wall Street Journal, partly because Schumer may be going against her in the 2022 primary, no?
Yeah, look, there are two things going on in Washington, neither of which is a good thing. I mean, first of all, it's somewhat despicable to claim this is a slush fund or a bailout. Okay, this isn't Washington throwing money at companies for silly purposes. It isn't business mishandling their affairs and asking Washington to fix things. This is business saying we are going to have to lay off massive numbers of employees unless we get some capital injected into the system because of a shutdown that the government ordered, okay? And so that's just nonsense, and Democrats know it. But yeah, on this point as well about the wish list and politics, you've got progressives that are out there trying to impose their ideological agenda and using a must-pass bill as a means of sneaking it through Congress. And it's not, we're in a crisis. Let's have responsible people come together, use what resources we have to help those who are actually hurting, stop it with the politics.
And then sort of outside the Beltway, but a real member, a certified member of the Beltway, Joe Biden, who's running for president, he's been faulting President Trump for not being prepared for the virus, which is rich when you consider the fact that President Trump was doing specific things about the virus before Biden was even talking about it.
Yeah, well, look, I think there's going to be a point, David, and it's not now, down the line when we all are able to take a breath and look and say, what did we learn from this in terms of being prepared for a pandemic, okay? But you also don't know what you don't know. And this is, as many public health experts have been pointing out, something unlike the world has ever seen before. And so, yeah, the time for finger pointing, but, you know, Joe Biden, he'd be a lot better off looking like a leader within his own party right now, and perhaps suggesting that they get on with this rescue package and stop trashing on the corporate space that actually we need to help fix this problem at the moment.
And, you know, one problem that Mr. Biden has is he has a record of his own, which he can't escape. It's been thrown back into his face. The L.A. Times, among others, mentioning that during President Obama's term in office, when they were battling the swine flu, they used up a lot of these N95 face masks, and they never replenished the supply. I mean, you know, he has the nerve to be talking about supplies that his administration never bothered to replenish.
Yeah, and there were suggestions in those stories that the recommendation was made to the Obama administration on more than one occasion that those supplies be replenished, and it never happened. And so, yeah, it's a bit odd having Joe Biden devoting half of a speech to his concerns about how well prepared the Trump administration was for a pandemic.
By the way, very quickly, we got to go, but how soon do you think we will get a bill that everybody agrees on? Is it going to happen in the next few hours or what?
I think we get an agreement in the next few hours. Maybe we get paper on it later tonight or first thing tomorrow, and a vote tomorrow. Kim
Strassel from the Wall Street Journal. Always good to see you, Kim. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thanks, David.
Okay. An Italian professor of virology saying that a fear of being perceived as racist contributed to his country's massive outbreak of coronavirus. The professor says the Italian government's response was, quote, lazy in the beginning, too much politics in Italy. There was a proposal to isolate people coming from the epicenter, coming from China. Then it became seen as racist, but they were people coming from the outbreak, end quote. Apparently unwilling to see what so-called wokeness did to Italy, Nancy Pelosi's coronavirus relief bill mentions diversity at least 22 times. One section titled Diversity Report would actually create a congressional oversight panel requiring any corporation receiving federal aid related to coronavirus to provide, quote, a diversity database to Congress like race, gender, and ethnic identity. President Trump, meanwhile, suspending travel from China on January 31st, despite that outcry from the left, a decision he spoke about earlier.
And I made a decision to close off to China. That was weeks early. And honestly, I took a lot of heat. Sleepy Joe Biden said it's xenophobic. I don't know if he knows what that means, but that's okay. He said it's racist, what I did. Thousands and thousands of more people, probably tens of thousands, would be dead right now if I didn't make that decision.
Joining us now by Skype is the host of the show, Lou Dobbs. Lou, great to see you. It's much better than a phone call. You know, we had Biden today talking about how the president was unprepared when, in fact, the president was moving to isolate the virus in China before Biden said one word about the virus in China. And you also now have a bill coming out of Congress that is more concerned about diversity than it is about saving lives. Your thoughts on all this?
Well, in order, Biden is actually unraveling as a candidate, and that should be worrisome to everyone, the Democrats first and foremost, but all of America. The man is obviously, his time is past. He's incapable of connecting thoughts and putting them into sentences and then even, God forbid, a paragraph. So I feel badly about Joe Biden, and I really mean that. I sympathize with him and his family. So I wouldn't worry too much about what he's saying because most people are disregarding it out of just respect. The rest of it, Nancy Pelosi is acting bizarrely. She and Schumer have suddenly taken on a manifesto, not a bill. When you go through all that is suggesting, that so-called bill, it's insane to think in the midst of the worst pandemic in almost over 100 years, just over 100 years in this country. We are listening to the tripe that these two, Schumer and Pelosi, are spewing. And worse, the national left-wing media is in most cases doing so without comment, let alone criticism, for crying out loud. So I think we should be very worried. I would say this to the Republican Party. If you accept one element of that manifesto, Pelosi's manifesto, that of the radical Dems, I don't think a single congressional Republican should be reelected in November. This is an outrage, an affront against the Constitution and the American people, and it should not be tolerated.
Well, and it's an affront to American business and restarting business. Imagine in the middle of coming out of a dead stall, businesses are forced to write these 5-year diversity plans and construct.
No, David, I'm not even going to consider that nonsense. That is, as I said, it is an insult. They can live or die by it, but I'm not even going to discuss that. I mean, it is so abhorrent and disgusting what they're doing to working men and women and their families. And to think that the national left-wing media daily attacks this president, who is working tirelessly, and I mean tirelessly, day after day, week after week, while these fools are playing pure politics and insisting on an ideological outcome when what we need desperately is help for the American people.
Well, meanwhile, Lou, all of the media's attempts to downgrade this administration's and its efforts are falling on deaf ears because he's doing pretty well at the polls.
The American people are watching what's unfolding before them. This is a crisis, and there's one man strong enough to deal with it. His name is Donald Trump. He's the president of the United States, no matter what Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the radical Dems would have us think otherwise. The national left-wing media will not treat him or his office with respect and thereby insult us all. It is astonishing to me that there is no one in the left-wing media who wants to be honest enough to say that precious Dr. Fauci, the head of infectious diseases at NIH, is among those who would not for a moment acknowledge that the Chinese refused to cooperate with the United States in the early days. And I pressed him on it time after time after time. And finally, he relented after about a month of further delay on the part of the Chinese. And those were the 3 to 4 weeks that were so important. And it is so important that that this president decided to put in a travel ban despite the cries of racism, xenophobia. He had the judgment and the intelligence to do what is right for the American people. And if you will note, that is the hallmark of his presidency. He does what is right for the American people, irrespective of the politics, irrespective of the nonsense and the orthodoxies that form on the left or the right, and no matter how venal and vicious they become.
Mr. Lou Dobbs, great to see you, Lou. Terrific to see you in person tonight. Thank you very much. Hope to see you back here soon. Joining me now is Dr. Mehmet Oz. He is host of the Dr. Oz Show and director of Columbia University's Integrative Medicine Center. Dr. Oz, great to see you. I just want to bring up Italy, if I can, first, because it was mentioned today that it appears that Italy may have reached its peak. That is, the numbers of new infections and deaths are coming down a bit. Does it seem that way to you?
Well, the last 2 days have been slightly lower than prior peaks, which is good news because if the pandemic was worsening in Italy, you'd see continued increases. I mean, the kinds of things that bring fear to us is a doubling of numbers. And so if they're not doubling, it's a good sign. And if they begin to come down, it's even better. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
And it also seems, by the way, that Germany has kind of flattened that curve a bit, which is what we're all hoping to do here. So it does appear that this is an invisible enemy that we can defeat.
Well, we know we're going to defeat this pandemic anyway. No matter what happens, we will win this. I mean, in the worst case scenario, we would have won, but it would have cost us a lot more lives. I think the social distancing and the aggressive steps taken by leaders at all levels of government, and I've got to applaud them because it's hard to do what they're doing, will show benefits. The question now becomes, what are the actual metrics we look for to see if it's working or not? And I was part of the press conference today, as you know, and Dr. Birx said very thoughtfully that we're not going to just focus on numbers of cases, because with all the extra testing, of course, that's going to increase. But by looking at mortalities, and we need better and more precise data there, we can begin to tell if we're heading in the right direction. I think within the next week, we'll have a pretty good gauge, which is why 15 days was the amount of time selected by the task force. And by then, we'll be able to identify for sort of directionally heading in the right spot. I was impressed that the president put a timeline out, arguing that Easter would be a nice time to come around.
What do you think about that? Do you think we could hit that note at Easter? That's when we could begin to reopen businesses and such?
Well, it's a good time for resurrection, right? And I think
sure
medically we'll have a pretty good idea. You know, I used the metaphor when I asked the president about that because I was curious what would happen if it didn't work out well. But in surgery, and I'm a surgeon, a good surgeon can tell when the surgery went well, which is what we're going through now these 2 weeks, and you can tell when the patient can go home, which, again, in theory, President Trump was arguing could be Easter. But a great surgeon goes one step further. They know when you have to readmit the patient if there's a problem. So as long as we have a game plan for dealing with a slippage, you know, if we sort of go backwards, then I think we can be more aggressive in starting to loosen up the reins on America.
Now, the head of the World Health Organization, who frankly was very late to recognize the urgency of the crisis, he seemed to be a little too forgiving of China, and that may be a political reason we can get into later. But he says that it's going to get a lot worse in the United States before it gets better. What do you think of his role and his prognostications about all this?
Well, the World Health Organization, in fairness to them, has a difficult task because they're trying to wrangle all these different countries. A lot of them have very different agendas. You know, big countries, and he was arguing that the G20, the largest countries, have to play a bigger role financially in supporting some of their initiatives. But, I mean, just numerically, he's right. We're going to have more people die and more people diagnosed. Well, that doesn't take rocket scientists to figure out. Doctors can figure it out, too, like me. But the question is, are the kinds of cases we're seeing reflective of past errors or people made mistakes in social distancing or other morbidities that folks have? Or is it a reflection of the fact that the pandemic is overwhelming our systems? And the number one metric to look for, I think, is do we have enough beds in our hospitals? Do we have enough ventilators? Do we have enough protection for our staff? That's why so many of the questions today to that White House task force were fundamentally about supporting states that are in trouble. But Governor Cuomo said something very important. He said, watch and learn from what we're doing and learn, and also take cautionary notes about the things that haven't happened correctly in New York, because it could happen in your state. But think about this. If we can do what other countries have done and allow New York and California to fix the problems, supporting these states as they need to, and Washington State as well, and then we avoid similar crises in other states, that would be fabulous for all of us.
Absolutely.
Why should West Virginia have to go through what New York's going through?
Dr. Oz, final question, and it's got to be relatively short, but have you ever seen a national, really an international organization of expertise and real medical genius, not to mention the genius of companies and entrepreneurs who are thinking up ways to invent cheap respirators and things like that? I've never seen any organization like the one we have going to come to a resolution of a medical crisis before. Have you?
I haven't. It gives you goosebumps, and it reasserts the remarkable capacity of America to mobilize. And that's what we're witnessing firsthand. I wish it didn't require a crisis for us to do this, but it is reassuring we have that capacity.
And it is miraculous, some of the cures that are being come up with and the new machines, et cetera. It's very encouraging. Dr. Oz, it's always encouraging to talk to you. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Take care. God bless you.
God bless you as well. Well, we'd like to hear your thoughts on all of this. Share your comments and follow Lou on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like him on Facebook and follow him on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. The state of New York today starting new trials to fight the coronavirus. Testing of the drugs chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, and the antibiotic Zithromax starting today. Governor Andrew Cuomo also saying today that blood plasma from recovered patients will be used to help those in the most serious conditions. Our next guest first told us about blood plasma therapy earlier this month. Joining us tonight is Dr. Ian Lipkin. He is the director for the Center for Infection and Immunity at Columbia University. Doctor, good to see you again. What have we learned about blood plasma therapy in the past month?
We've begun to expedite all the processing through the Food and Drug Administration. There's a consortium that really began with work out of Johns Hopkins and Mayo, and more recently groups all across the country. We have a large one at Columbia as well. And we're going to be testing the ability of this plasma to prevent either infection or progression of infection in an appropriate blinded trial so we can rapidly decide what works and what doesn't. It may well be that there are some applications where it causes harm rather than help, and we need to do that very cautiously.
Is it conceivable that if it does prove to be safe, that we could all Americans get a shot of this plasma before the next flu season kicks in? That is, whether this could really be the first barrier against a reinfection.
I don't think we're going to be able to scale up this kind of collection for the entire country, but we will be able to use lessons learned to develop other sort of pharmacological treatments based on what we found with the antibodies that will be implementable.
How long would it take? How long would it take to get a dose for all Americans? I mean, it seems like the procedure of drawing the plasma from those who have survived the coronavirus and then dividing it into a shot for every American would be quite a task.
It is tedious, and we need a large volume for every single one of these patients. We can probably get the amount required for 3 people, maybe 4, from a single plasma donor. But this is something we've only just begun to explore, and we don't know the optimal dose. The one thing I would like to say with respect to what we were talking about in terms of Easter, we really don't know when we're going to get this under control. It's extraordinarily important that we harmonize whatever restrictions we have across the country, because we have porous borders between states, between cities, and unless we're consistent, we're not going to get ahead of this thing. Still, the very best tool we have is isolation and confinement. And I think that what New York has done and Chicago's done and some others in Washington has done and so forth have been very, very helpful. And I would like to see that implemented broadly across the United States. All right. We need to protect ourselves.
But let me talk about the possibility of lessening the effects of this horrible virus through hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax, that combination, et cetera. Have we done enough research in that to know whether it works? First of all, whether it would be harmful at all, and secondly, whether it would be effective across the nation?
Excellent questions. What we're trying to do now is what we call double-blind studies. This is where neither the patient nor the physician knows which arm is there, whether it's the control arm, whether there's no drug or a modification of the drug, and the actual drug that's thought to be active. Until we complete those blinded trials, we won't know, in fact, what's effective. At Columbia, we have projects that are focused on using Plaquenil, hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine, as well as plasma therapy, and we're hoping to get through those as rapidly as we can. I would just like to say on this show tonight that this has become very personal for me, too, because I have COVID as of yesterday, and it is miserable.
I heard you cough. I didn't want to be a hypochondriac and say, I hope you don't have it, but you do.
If it can hit me, it can hit anybody. That's the message I want to convey.
Do you know where you got it?
I know, or I think I got it, but that's not the same thing as proving it, right?
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't matter. This virus is all over the United States.
Yeah, it sure is.
You can get it.
Dr. Ian
Well,
Lipkin, by the way, are you going to take any of these drugs that we've been talking about to alleviate the symptoms?
I am indeed. I'm taking one of them in about an hour's time, and I'm looking forward to feeling better. I certainly hope I do.
Who would know you were going to have to be trying these out on yourself? Well, best of luck to you, doctor. I really wish you good health. I hope this passes soon, not only in you, but in the whole country. Thank you for being here.
Sure. Bye-bye.
The coronavirus pandemic has brought new concerns about our dependence on drugs and medical supplies from China. And the answer is needed to end it. Edward Lawrence is in D.C. tonight with the very latest on this. Hi, Edward.
Yeah, David, lawmakers had a rude awakening about how much we are actually reliant on China for not just medical supplies, but also specifically prescription drugs. This raised alarm bells. Lawmakers held hearings, and we found out that 72% of prescription drug ingredients is sourced overseas. Now, drill down into that number, and 90% of the prescription drugs, antibiotics, vitamin C, ibuprofen, are made by China. Now, the U.S. does not have the ability to even make penicillin. This may open up a new front in pushing back against Chinese dominance in manufacturing. Senator Marco Rubio concerned that if China decided to stop exporting those medicines or for some reason could not export those medicines, it could devastate the U.S. health system. Senator Josh Hawley introduced a bill last month requiring the FDA to get more information or allowing them to get more information from drug companies about specifically where critical drugs are coming from and the ingredients and where those are coming from. Other Republicans in the House wanted to add back in tax incentives that were removed to allow manufacturing back in the United States, also specifically Puerto Rico going forward. Now, this is on the radar of lawmakers. Now, there will be more hearings on this in the future after the coronavirus has passed, but pharmaceutical companies are now on notice that there cannot be a shortage of prescription drugs again. Back to you, David.
All right, Edward, thank you very much. Well, Taiwan's health officials condemning the World Health Organization for ignoring early warnings about the coronavirus. Taiwan claiming the World Health Organization also ignored its questions early on during the outbreak. You see there the head of that organization. No surprise, Taiwan is barred from joining the World Health Organization because of pressure from mainland China. And joining me now is Dr. Michael Pillsbury. He is director of the Center for Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute, author of the book The 100-Year Marathon, which is certainly a prescient book. Dr. Pillsbury, great to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, David.
The head of WHO, which is the World Health Organization, he's the first non-medical doctor to head that organization. He's a bureaucrat, very close to the communist Chinese government. Do you think that shades his opinions at all?
No, I don't think so. The Chinese have done an excellent job from their point of view of essentially taking over all the UN specialized agencies, including the World Health Organization. Their friends are either head of it or they put in a candidate like they did with Dr. Tedros to run it. This is part of a long-term idea they've got that if they're going to be number one in the world, they need to get all the UN specialized agencies on their side. This is just a small part of what they've been doing. And frankly, until President Trump, nobody's really sounded the alarm about it.
Well, and in fact, with regard to WHO, they were very late to coming to the point of recognizing how dangerous the crisis was in China. It was, in fact, they actually condemned President Trump's travel ban against China when he realized that there were too many Chinese coming in and infecting Americans.
Well, something worse is going on with the WHO, as they call themselves. The WHO now receives all of China's information, their studies, their knowledge of how the virus can be fought or slowed down, and they don't give it bilaterally to America. This is really ingratitude, if you will, because America, our own CDC, set up their CDC starting back in the time of President Reagan. So instead of helping us specifically with all they could do, they're just not doing it. They're claiming that they work for the UN is their friend. To me, this is just a disaster because they could help us with clinical trials of various vaccines. They could help us with therapeutics. We know they make tens of thousands of ventilators. So instead of basically attacking President Trump today for being a failure, they could be offering to sell ventilators to us on an emergency basis. There's a lot China could do, but it's just not doing it. Looks like our assumptions about China being our friend are just wrong.
Well, meanwhile, Taiwan, who the Chinese hate, of course, because they consider Taiwan to be a part of their country, they have been doing extraordinarily good work. The Taiwanese have prevented infections despite their relationship with mainland China, despite a lot of Chinese going back and forth and Taiwanese going back and forth. They've done a heroic job. Why have they succeeded so well when China did so poorly for so long?
Well, first of all, they're a friend of the United States. Secondly, they have a world-class science and technology and public health system. They used to be an ally of ours. We used to station military forces there. We had a treaty. All that went away in 1979 with Jimmy Carter. We don't recognize Taiwan, David, as a country. They're called a limited or local authority of Beijing. So this is another example of where their help to us and to the world is rewarded by what? It's rewarded by their not being recognized as a country at all.
Meanwhile, bringing manufacturing of drugs back from China to the United States, or to somebody that really is a genuine ally of the United States or a part of the United States, like Puerto Rico. How soon can we begin to do that? Puerto Rico, of course, used to have this special tax status that was taken away from it. Oh, excuse me, Doctor. I'm sorry. Here's the Corona Task Force with President Trump. Let's listen in.
For the incredible sacrifices that they're making on behalf of our nation. And I want to encourage everyone to keep following our guidelines on social distancing, avoiding large gatherings, and hand washing, and all of the other things that everybody knows they're supposed to be doing. Ultimately, the goal is to ease the guidelines and open things up to very large sections of our country as we near the end of our historic battle with the invisible enemy. It'll go on for a while, but we win. We'll win. I said earlier today that I hope we can do this by Easter. I think that would be a great thing for our country, and we're all working very hard to make that a reality. We'll be meeting with a lot of people to see if it can be done. Easter is a very special day for many reasons. For me, for a lot of our friends, that's a very special day. And what a great timeline this would be. Easter as our timeline, what a great timeline that would be. My first priority is always the health and safety of the American people. I want everyone to understand that we are continuing to evaluate the data. We're working with the task force and making decisions based on what is best for the interest of our fantastic country. In order to defeat the virus, we must continue to be very strong. Your resilience and spirit has been inspiring to everyone. Right now, this virus is attacking 149 countries, but everybody looks to us and they're watching us. And I'm very proud to be your president. I can tell you that. There's tremendous hope as we look forward and we begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Stay focused and stay strong, and my administration and myself will deliver for you as we have in the past. Let me provide you an update on critical preparations and supplies in our war on the virus. Through FEMA, the federal government is distributing more than 8 million N95 respirators, 14 million surgical masks, and many, many millions more under order, and they'll be arriving soon. 2.4 million face shields, 1.9 million surgical gowns, 13.5 million gloves, and more than 4,000 ventilators to the areas of greatest need have already been sent, and we have 4,000 being delivered to New York. The federal government is using every resource at its disposal to acquire and distribute critical medical supplies. The core element of this strategy is my executive order authorizing the use of the Defense Production Act, which has, as you know, already been activated actually a long time ago, quite a long time ago. Private companies are heeding our call to produce medical equipment and supplies because they know that we will not hesitate to invoke the DPA in order to get them to do what they have to do. It's called leverage. You don't have to use it from the standpoint of actually it's been activated, but you don't have to use it. But the threat of it being there is great leverage, and companies are doing as we ask, and companies are actually even better than that. They're coming through, and they're calling us, and it's been really something to see. This morning, Ford, 3M, General Electric Healthcare are making tremendous numbers. They've already started of respirators, ventilators, and face shields. They're working together. We didn't have to exercise or utilize the DPA in any way. The fact that we have it helps, but we didn't have to, and for the most part, we won't have to. We're receiving full cooperation from companies with the understanding that the federal government stands ready to compel cooperation if need be. We haven't found that to be the case. It's been really amazing to see these big, strong, powerful, in some cases very small companies, family-owned companies, step up and make a lot of great product for what we're going through and what we will continue to be going through for a while. The Army Corps of Engineers and the National Guard are building 4 hospital facilities in New York City at the Javits Center, which will be operational very soon. They've already started. In addition, they're building 4 separate medical facilities in different parts of the state. We're dealing with Governor Cuomo on that. So you're going to have 4 hospitals and 4 medical facilities at the highest level, too. Really incredible facilities. Temporary, but incredible. We're also deploying the U.S. Navy hospital ship, and that will be arriving in New York Harbor in the not-too-distant future. It's finishing its maintenance. They're doing a very big maintenance, and what we did is we condensed it very seriously. And as you know, the other hospital ship, and these are incredible ships, it's already on its way to Los Angeles. So we're in frequent contact with state and local officials and getting a lot of work done. We're likewise building hospitals in Los Angeles. We're working also the state of Washington. We're working with the governor of the state of New Jersey, building a medical facility, a hospital facility, and doing a lot of work. I want to thank the people from FEMA, the great people from FEMA, and also the Army Corps of Engineers. Secretary Mnuchin and the members of my administration continue to work closely with Congress. I'm pleased to report that we are working to pass the biggest and boldest financial relief package in American history. Senators will soon hopefully vote on a $2 trillion bill that will deliver direct cash payments to struggling Americans. No fault of their own. This came out of nowhere. Nobody can imagine this even happened, but it's not their fault. We want to protect, and we will, all of the things that a person needs protected and a family needs protected. We're working on job retention loans for small businesses and extended unemployment insurance for laid-off workers. The legislation will also include billions of dollars for additional resources for our, and really heroic, these are incredible, doctors, nurses, brave, and hospitals, as well as support for hard-hit industries such as the airline industry and the cruise ship industry, which employ tremendous amounts of people and obviously serve very important functions beyond that, with very tough protections for the American taxpayer. The loans will be very secure and they will be very profitable, and at the same time they'll bridge, they call them bridge loans in many cases. They'll be bridging these companies back into very good health. And some of them are very important companies that 4 weeks ago didn't have a problem. I'm also confident that the Democrats will do the right thing. I feel very confident. They're working very hard together right now, Republicans and Democrats, and they're getting very close to a very fair deal and a great deal for the people of our country. Today, as you probably saw, the Dow surged over 2,100 points. That's the all-time record history of the exchange. This is very encouraging, and I think part of the reason is they are looking at what is close to being passed, and I think a very big part of it is they see that we want to get our country open as soon as possible. They see we're working very hard on that. That's a very big factor, I think, in today's historic gain. The legislation developed in the Senate is the first step to restoring confidence and stability to America's economy as we look ahead to the time when we can carefully and responsibly reopen our country for business, and we hope that's going to be very soon. I want to assure Americans that we have a team of public health experts. We've gotten to know them as well as I know them. They're great people, incredible, talented. They love our country. Also, economists and other professionals working to develop a sophisticated plan to reopen the economy as soon as the time is right, one based on the best science, the best modeling, and the best medical research there is anywhere on earth. Our great people have been, especially when it comes to our public health experts and officials, have been helping other countries, dealing with other countries, constant touch with other countries, helping them out, because many of them have never seen anything like what's happening. But our decision will be based on hard facts and data as to the opening. I'm also hopeful to have Americans working again by that Easter, that beautiful Easter day. But rest assured, every decision we make is grounded solely in the health, safety, and well-being of our citizens. This is a medical crisis. This isn't a financial crisis. But it's a thing that nobody has seen for many, many decades, nothing like this. Marshaling our economic strength is a key feature of defeating the virus, producing the materials, supplies, and equipment that we need, and they're doing a really fantastic job. We're helping the governors. We had a conference call the other day with the governors, and we allowed the press to join us on the call, and the spirit between us and the governors has been really great. We should never be reliant on a foreign country for the means of our own survival. I think we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot. This crisis has underscored just how critical it is to have strong borders and a robust manufacturing sector. For 3 years, we've embarked on a great national project to secure our immigration system and bring back our manufacturing jobs. We brought back many jobs, record numbers of jobs. And this really shows, this experience shows how important borders are. Without borders, you don't have a nation. Our goal for the future must be to have American medicine for American patients, American supplies for American hospitals, and American equipment for our great American heroes. Now both parties must unite to ensure the United States is truly an independent nation in every sense of the word. Energy independence, we've established that, and something incredible that we've established. We're energy independent, manufacturing independence, economic independence, and territorial independence enforced by strong sovereign borders. America will never be a supplicant nation. We will be a proud, prosperous, independent, and self-reliant nation. We will embrace commerce with all, but we will be dependent on none. Above all, we know that the best thing for our economy and the world right now is a very, very powerful victory over the virus. Every day, the American people are showing the unity and resolve that has always defined the character of our nation. In New York, citizens are using 3D printers to make hundreds of face shields. They're making them by the hundreds. In Texas, businesses and churches are uniting to collect gloves and thermometers for hospitals. In the selfless actions of our amazing citizens, we're seeing enduring strength of our magnificent nation, a spirit that can never be broken, and a victorious future that can never be denied. It never will be denied. Now, what I'd like to do is perhaps ask a person who has really established herself as maybe the world's great expert on what she does. If I could ask Deborah to come forward and say a few words, and then I'll ask Tony to come up and speak, and then our vice president, and then we'll take a few questions, and we'll do it quickly, and we'll probably see you again tomorrow. So, Deborah, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I think those of you who heard the town hall, we are continuing to accelerate testing at a record rate. We now have 370,000 tests that have been done. The majority of those, over 220,000 in the last 8 days, which of those of you who have been tracking the South Korea numbers, put us equivalent to what they did in 8 weeks that we did in 8 days. This was made possible because of the HHS team working together, bringing together the strength of the FDA with the CDC and under the leadership of Secretary Azar. We're very proud of those numbers, but we know that we have to do more, and we continue to accelerate in testing to ensure that those who need the test are tested first and have access. As we talked about yesterday, we're working on the ability for people to take their own sample. That does not mean home testing. That means taking your own sample in the front of your nose with available swabs into normal saline that can be transported to the laboratories. That will allow and free up all of the drive-thrus to be very sparing on PPE, because you'll be able to do that with gloves rather than the full PPE outfits. This will allow for more of that PPE to be dedicated to our hospitals. I think those of you who are tracking this epidemic closely, like I am, you will begin to see that there is encouraging results coming out of Italy. We are impressed by the decreases that are seen in mortality, the number of people succumbing to this illness, and the number of new cases. Our new cases will continue to surge because we're still working on our backlog, although we will be in touch with the laboratories after this press conference to really find out how many are still in backlog and how many were run in the last 24 hours. Until we can get into a 24-hour cycle, we're going to have disproportional number of new cases compared to the actual new cases, and we will let you know when we've reached that equilibrium. Finally, and I know Dr. Fauci will talk about this further, we remain deeply concerned about New York City and the New York metro area. About 56% of all the cases in the United States are coming out of that metro area, and 60% of all the new cases are coming out of the metro New York area, and 31% of the people succumbing to this disease. It means, because they still are at the 31% mortality compared to the other regions of the country, that we can have a huge impact if we unite together. This means, as in all places, they have to be following the presidential guidelines that were put out 8 or 9 days ago, and this will be critical. But to everyone who has left New York over the last few days, because of the rate of the number of cases, you may have been exposed before you left New York. And I think, like Governor DeSantis has put out today, everybody who was in New York should be self-quarantining for the next 14 days to ensure that the virus doesn't spread to others, no matter where they have gone, whether it's Florida, North Carolina, or out to far reaches of Long Island. We are starting to see new cases across Long Island that suggest people have left the city. So this will be very critical that those individuals do self-quarantine in their homes over these next 14 days to make sure they don't pass the virus to others based on the time that they left New York. So if they've already are 4 days out, then it's just 10 more days. So I thank you if you help get that message out to others. Dr. Fauci?